Hello, law students and legal practitioners. Today, we will analyze the case of Gardiner versus Romulo, GR number L-8921, decided by the Supreme Court on January 9, 1914. Let's begin. Here are the legal doctrines of the case. The purity of elections is a fundamental requirement of popular government. When statutory safeguards designed to protect the secrecy of the ballot are grossly disregarded, and such disregard is accompanied by fraud, intimidation, or coercion of voters, the entire election in the affected precinct or municipality may be annulled. Statutory provisions governing elections may be classified as mandatory or directory. After an election, non-compliance with directory provisions will not necessarily vitiate the results unless such non-compliance obstructs the free and intelligent casting of the vote, defeats the secrecy of the ballot, or makes it impossible to ascertain the true will of the electorate. Where fraud and illegal practices committed by election officers or persons in authority are diffusive and pervasive, such that fraudulent and honest votes are inseparably mixed, and it becomes impossible to determine which candidate obtained the majority of valid votes, the remedy is to reject the entire return from the affected precinct. Threats, intimidation, or coercion by public officials or powerful persons, even if not resulting in identifiable fraudulent ballots, are sufficient grounds for annulment of election returns when they are capable of influencing the free exercise of the right of suffrage and rendering the election result doubtful. Here are the relevant facts of the case. The case arose from an election protest involving the office of provincial governor of Tarlac. Ernesto Gardiner, the Protestant appellant, contested the election of Gregorio Romulo, the proteste appellee, particularly assailing the conduct of the election in the municipality of Cameling. Evidence showed that the election in all 5 precincts of Cameling was riddled with serious irregularities. Polling places were located on the second floor of buildings instead of on the ground floor as required by law. Voting booths lacked proper enclosures, doors, and guardrails, and were arranged in a manner that allowed passers-by to see how voters marked their ballots, effectively destroying ballot secrecy. Blank official ballots disappeared while in the custody of the municipal treasurer, and insufficient safeguards were adopted to distinguish lawful ballots from those unlawfully taken. Election inspectors fraudulently assisted illiterate voters, violating statutory requirements that assistance be rendered by 2 inspectors of different political affiliations and in accordance with the voters' wishes. Numerous ballots prepared for illiterate voters did not reflect the voter's true intent. There was also substantial evidence of intimidation and coercion. Governor Romulo and his supporters were found to have exchanged provisional ballots, threatened voters with reprisals, and engaged in electioneering within the prohibited distance from polling places. These actions were carried out by officials and influential persons, causing fear among voters and influencing the manner in which ballots were cast. Because these acts were widespread and interwoven with the entire electoral process in the municipality, it was impossible to segregate lawful votes from those affected by fraud and intimidation. Issue 1. Whether the irregularities in the conduct of the election in Cameling were mere harmless violations of election law. No, the irregularities were grave, systematic, and destructive of the secrecy and freedom of the ballot. Election laws exist to ensure free, honest, and secret voting. While minor or technical deviations may be tolerated, violations that impair essential elements of the election, such as secrecy of the ballot and freedom from coercion, are fatal. The court found that the defective polling booths, absence of guardrails, and exposure of ballots to public view were not trivial defects but fundamental violations that facilitated fraud and intimidation. These conditions alone seriously undermined the integrity of the election. Issue 2. Whether fraud and intimidation were sufficiently established to justify annulment of the election returns from Cameling. Yes, fraud and intimidation were clearly and convincingly proven. When fraud or coercion is practiced by election officers or persons in authority, and such misconduct is so pervasive that it renders the true will of the electorate uncertain, the law authorizes the rejection of the entire precinct return. The court held that fraud in handling ballots of illiterate voters, disappearance of official ballots, unlawful assistance by inspectors, and intimidation by the incumbent governor and his supporters were established by a preponderance of evidence. These acts influenced voters and corrupted the electoral process. Issue 3. Whether the entire election in Cameling should be annulled despite the presence of honest votes. Yes, the entire election in Cameling was annulled, where fraudulent and honest votes are so intermingled that separation is impossible and the result is rendered doubtful. Courts must reject the entire return as a last but necessary remedy. Given the diffusive nature of the fraud and intimidation, the court ruled that isolating valid votes was impossible. To preserve the integrity of elections and deter future abuses, the entire election in Cameling was annulled and excluded from the provincial canvass, resulting in Gardiner's proclamation as winner. Thank you for listening and happy learning. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Legal Shepherd PH YouTube channel and click the notification bell to stay updated on newly uploaded cases and jurisprudence. See you again for our next case discussions.